Hare Krishna, everyone. So we apologize. We had some technical difficulty. The material energy is imperfect, in case you didn't notice. So we apparently, what we were seeing on our phone that we recorded from, we were seeing that we were live, and it is being recorded. But we have reports from outside that it wasn't coming through, wasn't being transmitted. So what we do is we're restarting a second session, and this will start from text 18 of chapter 27 of the third canto. And in order for you all to hear the first part, you'll have to go on and watch the recording of the first session, which is from text 15. Okay. So now we're going on with text 18. As there is no separate existence of the earth and its aroma, or of water and its taste, there cannot be any separate existence of intelligence and consciousness. This is Devahuti speaking. This is part of her question. Purport. The example is given here that anything material has an aroma. The flower, the earth, everything has an aroma. If the aroma is separated from the matter cannot be identified. If there is no taste to water, the water has no meaning. If there is no heat in the fire has no meaning. Similarly, when there is want of intelligence, spirit has no meaning. Text 19. Hence, even though he is the passive performer of all activities, how can there be freedom for the soul as long as material and nature acts on him and binds him? Purport. Although the living entity desires freedom from the contamination of matter, he is not given release. Actually, as soon as the living entity puts himself under the control of the modes of material nature, his acts are influenced by the qualities of material nature, and he becomes passive. It is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Prakrite Kriyamanani Gunai. The living entity acts according to the qualities or modes of material nature. He falsely thinks that he is acting, but unfortunately, he is passive. In other words, he has no opportunity to get out of the control of material nature because it has already conditioned him. In Bhagavad Gita, it is also stated that it is very difficult to get out of the clutches of material nature. One may try in different ways to think that everything is void in the ultimate issue, that there is no God, and that even if the background of everything is spirit, it is impersonal. This speculation may go on, but actually it is very difficult to get out of the clutches of material nature. Devahuti poses the question that although one may speculate in many ways, where is liberation as long as one is under the spell of material nature? The answer is also found in Bhagavad Gita. Only one who has surrendered himself unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord Krishna, Mameva Ye Prapadyante, can be freed from the clutches of Maya. Since Devahuti is gradually coming to the point of surrender, her questions are very intelligent. How can one be liberated? How can one be in a pure state of spiritual existence as long as he is strongly held by the modes of material nature? This is also an indication to the false meditator. There are many so-called meditators who think, I am the Supreme Spirit Soul. I am conducting the activities of material nature. under my direction, the sun is moving and the moon is right. Now this sounds really far out. How can anybody, but I had a friend, and when I was in college, and well, maybe it was afterward. Anyway, we were childhood friends, and we knew each other for a very long time. And we got together later on in our life. We were both like transcendentalists. They were called hippies in those days. And we used to sit together and, enjoy the sunset in San Francisco because all the hills, and it's very beautiful. And he would sit there like this, right? And when the sun came up, he would look at me and, did you see? Did you see that? I am God because I made the sun come up. And I looked at him and said, Clint, you're completely mad, completely crazy. No, but he was convinced. That's how powerful the material nature is. So it's no wonder that we can, be controlled by it and think that we're not controlled. So powerful. They think that by such contemplation or meditation, they can become free. But it is seen that just 3 minutes after finishing such nonsensical meditation, they are immediately captured by the modes of material nature. And my friend Clint, as soon as he made the sun come up, then he would ask for a Marlboro. This question of Devahutis is for such a person who falsely claims that he is everything, that ultimately everything is void and there is no sinful or pious activities. That's convenient philosophy. That means I can do anything. All these are atheistic inventions. Actually, unless a living entity surrenders under the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as instructed in Bhagavad Gita, there is no liberation or freedom from the clutches of Maya. Text 20. Even if the great fear of bondage is avoided by mental speculation and inquiry into the fundamental principles, it may still appear again, since its cause has not ceased. Purport. Material bondage is caused by putting oneself under the control of matter, because of the false ego of lording it over material nature. Bhagavad Gita states, Ichcha, Dvesha, Samutina. 2 kinds of propensities arise in the living entity. One propensity is Ichcha, which means desire to lord it over material nature, or to be as great as the Supreme Lord. Everyone desires to be the greatest personality in the material world. Dvesha means envy. When one becomes envious of Krishna, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one thinks, why should Krishna be the all in all? I'm as good as Krishna. These 2 items, the desire to be the Lord and envy of the Lord, are the beginning cause of material bondage. Did we turn on that machine?
No, it's fine.
Oh, so we just restarted it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I don't think it had anything to do.
Okay. As long as a philosopher, salvationist, or voidist has some desire to be supreme, to be everything, or to deny the existence of God, the cause remains, and there is no question of his liberation. Devahuti very intelligently says, one may theoretically analyze and say that by knowledge he has become freed, but actually, as long as the cause exists, he is not free. Bhagavad Gita confirms that after performing such speculative activities for many, many births, when one actually comes to his real consciousness and surrenders under the Supreme Lord Krishna, then the fulfillment of his research and knowledge is actually achieved. There's a gulf of difference between theoretical freedom and actual freedom from material bondage. The Bhagavatam 10.14.4 says that if one gives up the auspicious path of devotional service and simply tries to know things by speculation, one wastes his valuable time. Klishyanti ye kevala bodha labdaye. The result of such labor of love is simply labor. There is no other result. The labor of speculation is ended only by exhaustion. Let's hear that again. The Bhagavatam 10.14.4 says that if one gives up the auspicious path of devotional service and simply tries to know things by speculation, one wastes his valuable time. Klishyanti ye kevala bodha labdaye. The result of such a labor of love is simply labor. There is no other result. The labor of speculation is ended only by exhaustion. The example is given that there is no benefit in husking the skin of an empty paddy. The rice has already gone. Similarly, simply by this speculative process, one cannot be freed from material bondage, for the cause still exists. One has to nullify the cause, and then the effect will be nullified. This will be explained by the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the following verses. Text 21. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one can get liberation by seriously discharging devotional service unto me, and thereby hearing for a long time about me or from me. By thus executing one's prescribed duties, there will be no reaction, and one will be freed from the contamination of matter. Purport. Sridhar Swami comments in this connection that by association with material nature alone, one does not become conditioned. Conditional life begins only after one is infected by the modes of material nature. If someone is in contact with the police department, that does not mean that he is a criminal. As long as one does not commit criminal acts, even though there is a police department, he is not punished. Similarly, the liberated soul is not affected, although he is in the material nature. Even the Supreme Personality of Godhead is supposed to be in association with material nature when he descends, but he is not affected. One has to act in such a way that in spite of being in the material nature, he is not affected by contamination. Although the lotus flower is in association with water, it does not mix with the water. That is how one has to live, as described here by the Personality of Godhead, Kapiladev. Animita nimitena sudharmena malatmana. One can be liberated from all adverse circumstances simply by seriously engaging in devotional service. How this devotional service develops and becomes mature is explained here. In the beginning, one has to perform his prescribed duties with a clean mind. Clean consciousness means Krishna consciousness. One has to perform his prescribed duties in Krishna consciousness. There is no necessity of changing one's prescribed duties. One simply has to act in Krishna consciousness. In discharging Krishna conscious duties, one should determine whether by his professional or occupational duties, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is satisfied. In another place in the Bhagavatam it is said, Sunushitasya dharmasya sangsitir haritoshanam. Everyone has some prescribed duties to perform, but the perfection of such duties will be reached only if the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is satisfied by such actions. For example, Arjuna's prescribed duty was to fight, and the perfection of his fighting was tested by the satisfaction of Krishna. Krishna wanted him to fight, And when he fought for the satisfaction of the Lord, that was the perfection of his professional occupation, his professional devotional duty. On the other hand, when contrary to the wish of Krishna, he was not willing to fight, that was imperfect. If one wants to perfect his life, he should discharge his prescribed duties for the satisfaction of Krishna. One must act in Krishna consciousness, for such action will never produce any reaction. Animita nimetena. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. Yagyartat kamanonyatra. All activities should be performed simply for yagya, or the satisfaction of Vishnu. Anything done otherwise, without the satisfaction of Vishnu or yagya, produces bondage. So here it is also prescribed by Kapila Muni that one can transcend material entanglement by acting in Krishna consciousness, which means seriously engaging in devotional service. This serious devotional service can develop by hearing for long periods of time. I'll read that again. This serious devotional service can develop by hearing for long periods of time. Chanting and hearing is the beginning of the process of devotional service. One should associate with devotees and hear from them about the Lord's transcendental appearance, activities, disappearance, instructions, and so on. There are two kinds of shruti, or scripture. One is spoken by the Lord, and the other is spoken about the Lord and his devotees. Bhagavad Gita is the former, and Srimad-Bhagavatam the latter. One must hear these scriptures repeatedly from reliable sources in order to become fixed in serious devotional service. I mean, how much more clear does it have to be? Does Prabhupada have to make it? Although engagement in such devotional service, through engagement in such devotional service, one becomes freed from the contamination of Maya. It is stated in the Srimad-Bhagavatam that hearing about the Supreme Personality of Godhead cleanses the heart of all contamination caused by the influence of the three modes of material nature. By continuous, regular hearing, the effects of the contamination of lust and greed to enjoy or lord it over material nature diminish, and when lust and greed diminish, one then becomes situated in the mode of goodness. This is the stage of Brahman realization, or spiritual realization. I'm going to just real quickly select this because I want to later copy it for my offering next year. Oops. What verse am I on? Huh? 21. Sorry, I tried to select it by. I need to do the key strokes. Yeah, here it is. That's it. Text 22. This devotional service has to be performed strongly, in perfect knowledge, and with transcendental vision. One must be strongly renounced and must engage in austerity and perform mystic yoga in order to be firmly fixed in self-absorption. Purport. Devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be performed blindly due to material emotion or mental concoction. It is specifically mentioned here that one has to perform devotional service in full knowledge, by visualizing the Absolute Truth. We can understand about the Absolute Truth by evolving transcendental knowledge, and the result of such transcendental knowledge will be manifested by renunciation. That renunciation is not temporary or artificial, but is very strong. It is said that development of Krishna consciousness is exhibited by proportionate material detachment, or vairagya. If one does not separate himself from material enjoyment, it is to be understood that he is not advancing in Krishna consciousness. Renunciation in Krishna consciousness is so strong that it cannot be deviated by any attractive illusion. One has to perform devotional service in full tapasya, austerity. One should fast on the 2 Ekadasi days, which fall on the 11th day of the waxing and waning moon, and on the birthdays of Lord Krishna, Lord Rama, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There are many such fasting days. Yogena implies that one is seriously absorbed in the self and is able, by development of knowledge, to understand his constitutional position in relationship with the Superself. In this way, one becomes fixed in devotional service, and his faith cannot be shaken by any material allurement. Text 23. The influence of material nature has covered the living entity, and thus it is as if the living entity were always in a blazing fire. But by the process of seriously discharging devotional service, this influence can be removed, just as wooden sticks which cause a fire are themselves consumed by it. Purport. Fire is conserved in wooden sticks, and when circumstances are favorable, the fire is ignited. But the wooden sticks, which are the cause of the fire, are also consumed by the fire, if it is properly dealt with. Similarly, the living entity's conditioned life of material existence is due to his desire to lord it over the material nature, and due to his envy of the Supreme Lord. Thus his main diseases are that he wants to be one with the Supreme Lord, or he wants to become the Lord of material nature. The karmis try to utilize the resources of material nature and thus become its Lord and enjoy sense gratification. And the jnanis, the salvationists, who have become frustrated in enjoying the material resources, want to become one with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or merge into the impersonal effulgence. These two diseases are due to material contamination. Material contamination can be consumed by devotional service, because in devotional service, these two diseases, namely the desire to lord it over material nature and the desire to become one with the Supreme Lord, are absent. Therefore, the cause of material existence is at once consumed by the careful discharge of devotional service in Krishna consciousness. A devotee in full Krishna consciousness appears superficially to be a great karmi, always working. But the inner significance of the devotee's activities is that they are meant for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. This is called bhakti, or devotional service. Arjuna was apparently a fighter, But when by his fighting he satisfied the senses of Lord Krishna, he became a devotee. Since a devotee also engages in philosophical research to understand the Supreme Person as he is, his activities may thus appear to be like those of a mental speculator, but actually he is trying to understand the spiritual nature and spiritual activities. Thus, although the tendency for philosophical speculation exists, the material effects of fruitive activities and empiric speculation do not exist, because this activity is meant for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 24. By discovering the faultiness of his desire to lord it over material nature, and by therefore giving it up, the living entity becomes independent and stands in his own glory. Purport. Because the living entity is not actually the enjoyer of the material resources, his attempt to lord it over material nature is, at the ultimate issue, frustrated. As a result of frustration, he desires more power than the ordinary living entity, and thus wants to merge into the existence of the Supreme Enjoyer. In this way, he develops a plan for greater enjoyment. When one is actually situated in devotional service, that is his independent position. Less intelligent men cannot understand the position of the eternal servant of the Lord. Because the word servant is used, they become confused. They cannot understand that this servitude is not the servitude of this material world. To be the servant of the Lord is the greatest position. If one can understand this, and can thus revive one's original nature of eternal servitorship of the Lord, one stands fully independent. A living entity's independence is lost by material contact. In the spiritual field, he has full independence, and therefore there is no question of becoming dependent upon the three modes of material nature. This possession is attained by a devotee, and therefore he gives up the tendency for material enjoyment after seeing its faultiness. The difference between a devotee and an impersonalist is that the impersonalist tries to become one with the Supreme so that he can enjoy without impediment. Whereas a devotee gives up the entire mentality of enjoying and engages in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. That is his constitutional, glorified position. At that time, he is Ishvara, fully independent. The real Ishvara, or Ishvara Parama, the Supreme Ishvara, or Supreme Independent, is Krishna. The living entity is Ishvara only when engaged in the service of the Lord. In other words, transcendental pleasure derived from loving service to the Lord is actual independence. Text 25. In the dreaming state, one's consciousness is almost covered, and one sees many inauspicious things. But when he is awakened and fully conscious, such inauspicious things cannot bewilder him. Purport. In the condition of dreaming, when one's consciousness is almost covered, one may see many unfavorable things which cause disturbance or anxiety. But upon awakening, although he remembers what happened in the dream, he is not disturbed. Similarly, in the position of self-realization or understanding of one's real relationship with the Supreme Lord, one makes one completely satisfied. I'll read that again. Similarly, the position of self-realization or understanding of one's real relationship with the Supreme Lord makes one completely satisfied, and the three modes of material nature, which are the cause of all disturbances, cannot affect him. In contaminated consciousness, one sees everything to be for his own enjoyment. But in pure consciousness, or Krishna consciousness, he sees that everything exists for the enjoyment of the Supreme Enjoyer. That is the difference between the dream state and wakefulness. The state of contaminated consciousness is compared to dream consciousness, and Krishna consciousness is compared to the awakened stage of life. Actually, as stated in Bhagavad Gita, the only absolute enjoyer is Krishna. One who can understand that Krishna is the proprietor of all the three worlds, and that he is the friend of everyone, is peaceful and independent. As long as a conditioned soul does not have this knowledge, he wants to be the enjoyer of everything. He wants to become a humanitarian or philanthropist and open hospitals and schools for his fellow human beings. This is all illusion, for one cannot benefit anyone by such material activities. If one wishes to benefit his fellow brother, he must awaken his dormant Krishna consciousness. This Krishna consciousness position is that of pratibuddha, which means pure consciousness. And we'll stop there for tonight. Having stepped out of the dream for a few moments. All right, now we come to our favorite time, or anyway, reflections. Anything that stood out in the readings that we want to discuss or meditate upon, or a question, please feel free. Just a second, Shamagori is going to say something. Hare Krishna, Shamagori.
Krishna. So when Devahuti is asking her question, then she says this: there cannot be any separate existence of intelligence and consciousness.
Well, she's not saying that she's saying that there can't be, but what she's really saying is, I can't understand how there can be.
So
that's the question. Her question is, how is it possible what she's really saying is, I can understand that I'm not the body. That's fairly easy. But to understand how the consciousness and intelligence is intertwined and is actually different, that I cannot understand. That's the question.
And that's my question as well. So how intelligence and consciousness relate to each other?
The material intelligence is right next to the consciousness, in the sense that, we've been reading about the transformations and how the material forms and personalities that come from being in different bodies arise, and the parts of all the bodies and the subtle body arise as a transformation from subtle to gross energy. And it starts out from contaminated consciousness. Consciousness is pure. Original consciousness is Krishna consciousness. When it touches the false ego, that false ego is it's like you got a pure light and you put a very, very thin film that just barely has any color in it. It looks almost the same. So that when the consciousness touches the false ego, which is the most subtle material element, then the soul becomes influenced, covered, and identifies with the material energy. And then the spiritual intelligence is right next to that, the creative intelligence.
It's it interesting?
So therefore, they're separate because there's an intelligence also in the consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
The consciousness, the soul has a body, and that spiritual body has all the parts that we see in the material world, only spiritual, including intelligence. So when that consciousness becomes touched by false ego and identifies with the material energy, then the material intelligence is right next to that. It's like a reflection. The tree is standing here and it reflects on the body of water and it looks like this. In one sense the tree, the roots are down, and the other sense when you look at it from here it looks like the roots are going up. But you can't figure it out.
Yeah, it is.
As long as you're trying to figure it out by your material intelligence, it doesn't work. Therefore, what's Kapila Dev's answer?
Just hear about.
Not just hear about. Hear strongly for a long period of time from the proper source. That's the only solution.
Is the interesting thing that the soul, basically consciousness is the symptom of the soul. But the soul never gets contaminated, however consciousness seems to. So consciousness seems to change. But
the consciousness doesn't change. The consciousness is flowing. Consciousness doesn't change. Consciousness is flowing from the soul through the body.
So just the light.
It's like the aroma coming through the air. The aroma doesn't actually. The air doesn't become contaminated by the aroma. It just carries it. So the material energy is through the bloodstream and through the different avenues and air, live air. It gets taken to all parts of the body.
Because we even use the term the developing of consciousness. So which means that there is a low consciousness.
No, it
and
means awakening of consciousness. Developing of consciousness doesn't mean consciousness changes. It means the body changes. And so when the consciousness comes through the body, it appears differently. And if we hear for a long time this philosophy, continuously, seriously, for a long time, eventually we get it and we don't forget it. And if we don't, then time will cause you to forget, no matter who you are. That's why when I hear the devotees say, well, Prabhupada's books are just the basics, and then they stop reading them. Or we read the Gita, and then now we're on the Chaitanya Charitamrita, so we don't read the Gita anymore. But you are, because the verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita are filled with verses of the Bhagavad Gita. And Lord Chaitanya is teaching the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedas and the Upanishads to people who have no faith and awakening their faith through the teachings of those scriptures. And by constant hearing, the soul eventually gets it. It's like digesting. You hear and you hear and you digest. And when you've actually digested it, then you get that energy. You get that spiritual energy, that faith.
So basically we are in control of that we are doing it. But the result of it is out of our hands.
Say that again?
I'm not sure if I can explain this, but basically we are we have the power to actually do this, like here, here, here.
Well,
But the result...
Yes, we have the power to understand because it's inherently in us. Just like the power... Yes, we have the power to understand because it's inherently in us. It's like the power of walking is in the human body. And the baby gets up and falls down, and gets up and falls down, and gets up and falls down. But eventually, because the ability to walk is contained within the body, eventually it walks. So like that, we have to keep trying and keep hearing until that innate understanding in us comes out, is awakened.
I have a question.
Yes, Dr. Matt.
So is it similar to what we heard Gopi Pranadana, Texas man, Pranadana Prabhu talk about, where someone goes through like the neophyte stage and it takes like 30 years for this to really permeate the body and the consciousness to really come through.
No, the consciousness is permeating the body all the time.
All the time.
Consciousness is always there. It's a matter of dissolving the subtle body.
Dissolving the subtle body.
Yes, the material subtle body. The material subtle body is dissolved by the process of devotional service, by serious hearing and chanting over a long period of time. It's just like the Vedas use the example of the iron rod. When you put it in the fire, if you leave it in the fire, then it becomes hotter, and eventually it becomes fire. So if you stay in constant absorption, and that's the key word is absorption, the more you can stay absorbed in the remembrance that you are the soul, and what Krishna consciousness is, and looking through the eyes of this knowledge and at the world, rather than your own personal conception of it, what it might be, then eventually you digest it. And by digest, just like the food is digested, it used the example, we just heard it. You know, the sticks of the fire start the fire, but it becomes, destroyed by the fire at the same time.
Yes. And that progress that one makes, and if someone makes that progress in one life, do they pick up where they left off if they leave their body?
And that's why some people can understand it very easily and take it up very easily. It means they've digested something before.
There is a fascinating
Dr. Paul. And you're next, Mark, because you had something to say also.
It says here, the thing that was really the word I'd like to use is liberating. It says, by discovering the faultiness of his desiring to lord it over material nature, and by therefore giving it up, the living entity becomes actually independent and stands in his own glory.
Yeah.
So he's not, I think, maybe a lot of people think they're going to lose something by giving up what they were attached to. Suffering. And the people are addicted to suffering.
Therefore, how do you know when Krishna is satisfied?
You're satisfied.
When you actually become satisfied.
Really?
When you're actually satisfied, and you're no longer restless, and you're no longer searching for something outside of yourself for your satisfaction, then you stand independent. You become completely dependent on Krishna, and that makes you independent of the influence of the material nature. So when it says that the soul stands in its own glory, it means that it stands aloof from the material nature and is no longer dependent on the material nature for his imagined existence.
Which is freedom.
Yes, that is complete freedom. But the complete freedom, it's not just a idea, one actually feels satisfied, and one no longer chases after the illusion. One no longer chases after sense gratification. Sense gratification makes him feel like he's going down rather than going up. Therefore, he's standing independently, standing self-satisfied.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Text 16 mentions that when we accept things as they are, it can make one liberated. But it also goes on to say, but my question here is, how do we know? How do we know when we have when we're actually our false ego is eliminated?
Same answer. Same answer. We're satisfied. Only really satisfied. It's not that the satisfaction lasts for 10 minutes, or for 10 seconds, or for a year. That's why Bhakta Matt was talking about. During Prasadam today, we were listening to Gopi Prananda Prabhu, and he was talking about the levels of spiritual advancement and how, in general, it takes a lifetime. Now, it can take 1 second. If a person has done a lot of devotional service in his previous life, there are instances in which a soul will leave the body before they come out of the womb. They take birth in the womb of a mother, devotee mother, and they just have a little bit more to suffer before they're free, and they go back to Godhead right from that position. But mostly, the common or the general process is that it takes a whole lifetime. So, therefore, you know that Krishna is satisfied with you when you're actually satisfied. And it's not just a mental conception that now I feel good, and then 10 minutes later, I feel bad again. And
So no more hankering and no more lamenting.
that's it. Nashochiti Nakangshiti. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. Brahma Bhuta. Jiva Bhuta means a conditioned soul. Brahma Bhuta means a liberated soul. Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. Prasanatma means satisfied. Nashochiti Nakangshiti. Satisfied means we're no longer hankering for what we don't have, and we're no longer lamenting for what we've lost. We actually live in the present. We don't live in the past, we don't live in the future. And that state is attained by absorption in Krishna consciousness. And therefore it's talking about hearing seriously. For a long time, seriously, from the proper source. And it works. By association, it works.
Another thing, we were also reading about how the living entity can think themselves as God, which is quite amusing and amazing, but there's a lot of talk about, and I think somehow I have this thing that it maybe falls into that category that many people, pseudo-spiritualists, and they kind of try to focus on that we have to love ourselves. There is this self-love that gets promoted a lot, and I just have this feeling that it's in that category that I'm so important, I'm God, therefore I have to love myself.
No, it's not like that. We have that feeling of self-preservation. It's natural self-preservation. The love of oneself is because we're inside the body. We love our own body because the soul is in the body. And we love our soul because it's a part of the Supreme Soul. Therefore, real love of God is manifest, or the satisfaction of the soul, or real love is manifested when we wake up and realize that we are actually a part of God, and that the source of our existence is God, and the source of our body and mind is spirit, is our own self, and therefore the tendency, it's a real tendency to want to love oneself, but they don't love themselves. They don't even know who they are. They're just loving the body. But they love the body because the soul is inside.
So it is natural, but at the same time to promote it.
As the goal, to promote it as the end, that's illusion.
Yeah.
That's a distortion of the truth. And that's caused by the influence of the material energy. It distorts the consciousness. It distorts the truth. We're always under control, and yet we want to be free from that control. That's called rebelliousness or envy. Nirmat saranam satam. So therefore Krishna says in the beginning of Bhagavatam, one who's free from envy is an honest, satam, saintly. That person can hear, and that person can become fully God conscious just by hearing. So at all stages, the hearing is necessary. Even if one is fully self-realized, it's not that now I've realized, so now I don't have to hear anymore. We have to go on hearing. Because the influence of time is all-powerful. That's Krishna. So therefore, the beginning stage is to admit that we're suffering. To admit that we don't know, to admit that we're suffering, and to admit that we don't want these things, and yet we're forced. Why? That's the beginning. And with that consciousness, we hear the Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita. And when we've digested, that meal, then we become strong. Just like when you eat, you digest. When your stomach's full, you don't want to eat anymore. You don't feel like eating anymore. No one can tell you, no, you're not satisfied. You need to eat more. So when you've digested, as you digest this knowledge, you become more and more satisfied. And when you become fully digested, then you're fully satisfied. But that satisfaction doesn't make you sit down contented and just sleep, and or just do nothing because now I'm satisfied. Now I reached the goal. We were reading that in Briya Bhagavatamrita the other night, that it's not a fault, that there's always something more to attain. The impersonalists, they think that means you haven't realized the truth, because once you realize the truth, you'll become one, and then there is nothing more. That's the goal. It's simple. But spiritual life, real spiritual life, means that the more you realize yourself, the more satisfied you feel, and there's no end to it. And the more variety, there's more relationship, there's more fascination, there's everything. Loving exchange with the soul and God.
We've got a few reflections online.
We have some reflections online. Okay, let's go.
Okay. Looks like we've got a question from Rati Manjari.
Haribol, Rati.
And just want to say thank you, Rati, for helping me keep the broadcast going and live so everyone can see it. All right, she says, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. I have a question about the point about the true independence of the living entity being only possible if one is fully Krishna conscious. I can understand that attaining Krishna consciousness gives one liberation from the control of the modes of nature, but how do we reconcile this point of independence with the total dependence Krishna's pure devotees feel on him? Is this a matter of voluntary surrender because of love?
It's a matter of identification. When we identify ourselves with the material nature, then we are controlled by the material nature. That was in one of the purports, that the person thinks he is the money, and then when the money is lost, he thinks he's lost. Because the soul is identifying with the material nature, the soul is thinking that he's material. So this independence means that we're no longer thinking that we are material. Therefore, when the material energy changes around us, it doesn't disturb us. We become independent of those changes. The body's changing. We are independent of the change. Therefore, the word dhira is used. Dhira tatra namuyate. When the body changes, the soul is not disturbed, who is sober, who is Krishna conscious. So it's like a teeter-totter, the attachment that the real attachment, the natural attachment or love that we have for Krishna, as it becomes awakened, the detachment from material energy happens automatically without separate endeavor. It's not that we have to sit there and grit our teeth, and tolerate the itching of the material nature. It doesn't disturb us anymore because we're not identifying with it.
We get a higher taste.
It may be there, but we're not identifying with it anymore. We're absorbed in Krishna out of love. So the more you're absorbed in Krishna out of love, then automatically you're detached from the material energy, because we see that it's different. We see that Krishna is different and the soul is different than the material energy. And we're absorbed in the spiritual energy. And in the ultimate stage, in the perfectional stage, when that association is complete, or when we've left the rod in the fire long enough, then the iron rod becomes fire. So when our body and mind are spiritualized by constant contact with Krishna, then, as I said before, the material mind dissolves and the spiritual mind is revealed or awakened. And that spiritual mind is always thinking of Krishna. That's Krishna consciousness. Krishna conscious means to be always thinking of Krishna, to be absorbed in Krishna. So when we practice doing it, then that's one thing. But when we're doing it naturally, all the time, by absorption, then we become, in the sense of independent or free from the attachment to the material nature, the affection for the material nature. So affection for Krishna and affection for material nature are two different things. And the more one is there, the other one, the less the other one is there. Like a teeter-totter.
Very nice.
And the reason we have to keep hearing it again and again and again is because, especially in this age, as soon as we stop hearing, we forget. It's as simple as that. Therefore, the goal is to become absorbed. Okay, what else?
A little follow-up question from Rati. Roddy says, And is this spiritual independence also experienced by the living entity's free choice of precisely how to serve the Lord?
No, that you can't decide those things. No, it's revealed knowledge. It's revealed knowledge. Our duty from here is to purify our existence, to learn to live in the mode of goodness, and through that taste, through the how does it say in the Gita? Through when all the gates of the body are happy, feeling happy, right? Then Krishna, and when we begin to engage in devotional service and become absorbed in devotional service, not in order to get something for ourselves, not in order to become liberated, not to become free from material existence, but out of love for Krishna, to satisfy Krishna. Then Krishna inside the heart, it becomes satisfied. And because he's in the heart and is satisfied and is a source of our intelligence and strength and everything, then we become satisfied. It's not something artificially created by our mind. It's revealed knowledge.
And Krishna's waiting for us.
Yes.
That's the point, isn't it? Like, we don't have to kind of create the connection or manufacture something that isn't currently there.
Yeah.
It's like reveal is already there.
Yes.
So it's not like we're manufacturing anything because it exists in the first place.
So our desire,
Yeah.
the tangent, the tangent, or what is the word? The medium that causes both material existence and spiritual existence is desire. So when our desire changes from wanting to enjoy in this material world to give pleasure to Krishna, as we wake up, just like, this is another example that was used in the reading. And all through this section of the Bhagavatam, the process of spiritual realization is similar, not exactly, but similar to the process of waking up from deep sleep to dreaming sleep to waking state. When we're dreaming and we're being chased by a tiger, or we've stolen something and we're running away to get away, and all of a sudden we run into some quicksand and we're running, trying to run, but we can't run, and persons are coming right after us and we can't get away, and finished, and then all of a sudden we wake up, and then we just become relief, so it's like that. As long as we're thinking that this is real, this material world, and we may still be here in the body, and we may still have our duties, but we don't identify those duties with us. We do them out of duty, but at the same time, we absorb more and more in loving Krishna, absorbed in Krishna consciousness, and seeing, therefore, those personalities, whether it be our loved ones, or family, or our friends, or our employers and employees, or whatever it is, we see them in relationship to Krishna. That's the tangent point. The desire. Like you went into the Apple store today. We met a very nice, it always happens when we go to the Apple store, because there's lots of nice young people there. And, we talk to them while we're doing what we're doing, and we talked to them, and then we gave them a book, and they were like, just lit up, they were saying, nobody talks to them like that. When you go in, they're just find out where are you, how are you doing, how are you feeling, what's going on, why are you looking like that, and then there's a real exchange, and they like it because nobody does that out there. Everything is just business.
Maharaj, in terms of our professional duties and devoting our professional duties, whatever we may do in life, perhaps in the Grihastha ashram, as you know, I'm a teacher, and out there in the material world, as we all know, there's great pressure to want promotion, to go up through the salary spine, feelings of discontentment about or dissatisfaction about maybe you missed that promotion, or you would like some acceleration through the career ladder, as it were. These are normal sort of karmic feelings and behaviours out there. But if we, as devotees, if we are dedicating our professional duties to Krishna, how does one know? And I suspect perhaps we've already answered this, whether we are satisfying Krishna through our professional duties.
Yoga Yukta Vishuddhatma Vijitatma Jitendriya Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma Kurvan Api Nalipite. Not only will we be satisfied, but everyone will be satisfied with us. And if they aren't, we're not disturbed, because that means that person's envious, and we will automatically, the destiny that we have to go up or down or whatever is going to happen one way or another. But if you are pure, yoga yukta, when you're engaged, vishuddhatma, purely, not for personal gain, then automatically people become more happy with you, even your boss, even your superiors, and you will go up. And some people, when they see that, they'll be envious of you and they'll try to bring you down. But it won't make any difference, because you'll see that person also, with an equal mind. Therefore, all through the Gita, he emphasizes the need to become equipoised. Arjuna was a professional warrior, and he fought for Krishna, and he was killing his own relatives and his own friends and family members. But he was doing it for Krishna, because Krishna wanted him to. So if you come to that state of consciousness where you're doing what you're doing, teaching these students and doing whatever you're doing for the pleasure of Krishna, it may not be completely pure, because you could be studying, you could be teaching them the Gita, or teaching them the Srimad-Bhagavatam. But whatever you are doing, if you're doing it, thinking that those persons are Krishna's devotees or belong to Krishna, then you're doing it for Krishna, then Krishna will maintain you, it will keep you from going down, and eventually you will go up. And you'll be successful because people will become satisfied with you. Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma. Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma. One is you're satisfied with others, and others are satisfied with you. That's how you know whether you're satisfied, Krishna's satisfied. And the more you're like that, the more people are satisfied with you. And the more you're satisfied with others. Therefore Prabhupada could change the whole world. That doesn't mean that the whole world becomes changed overnight, instantaneously. But it means that, the process is now moving in that direction.
We're really blessed. I just feel so blessed to know this.
Bhakta Paul is saying we are blessed to know this, and you're absolutely right.
that knowledge is so
profound. The knowledge is so profound, and it allows us to see who we are and who everybody is. And it gives us compassion. We feel compassion for those who don't know this. We went out today to do some shopping, and our one time a year or 2 times a year we go out shopping. And my gosh, the people, the faces of the people are just, it's becoming more and more apparent, or we're seeing it more and more. It's always been like that. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you very much for your participation in this serious hearing. This is what it means to hear seriously, to hear every night, to hear every day. Even if you can't come to this, every day you have to hear and try to understand. And if you do that and continue your duties, and if you say, I don't have time, then you're an illusion, because there's always time. People have no time for that, but they go out and they do the most crazy things. You know? They don't have time, but they have time to go on a holiday in Spanish Riviera, or the Spanish Riviera, or Canaries, or Mallorca, or Greece, or wherever, Italy, beaches.
Trying to satisfy people in that way,
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad thing to buy something for someone else. That's a spirit of giving, and it helps. That helps. Spending the fruits for the pleasure of someone else, but it's all for sense gratification. So it's not satisfying. It's a big day, you know. What do they call it? Boxing Day, where everybody takes the presents back and try to change it in for something that they wanted. Yeah.
We had another question come through.
Who is that?
We had another question from Gagula CSOKA. I don't know how to say your last name. Shoka? CSOKA.
CSO Choka. But what's the first name? Gula Shoka.
Yeah.
Hungarian.
Yeah.
So who is that? Gula Shoka. What, spiritual name? Spiritual name?
No, it's a Hungarian name.
I know the Hungarian name, but what's the initiated name? Okay.
I'll read the question. Do you mind if I use the mic?
Maybe it's Gautama? Is that Gautama? Gautama, reveal yourself. Type something. Whoever you are, type it to give us your spiritual name, because we don't know who you are.
It says, Hare Krishna, if material nature created by Krishna, and we perceive and love material nature, our body, as part of Krishna, how can we be wrong? We using material nature, food, clothing, car, money, etc. to serve Krishna.
According to the Bhagavatam, that's called ignorance. If you think like that, it's ignorance. Because if you see something separate from Krishna, then you're in Maya. That's what Maya is. So, we're not using the clothes and this and that for our pleasure and thinking that we're doing it for Krishna. That's Maya. That separates us from Krishna. That's what separates us from Krishna. Bina, Prakriti, Ashtada, the energies that you're talking about are separated energies of Krishna. Ultimately, they're Krishna's energy, but they're separated by Krishna's will. And we are in that material nature, and therefore we are forgetful of Krishna. When we remember Krishna and actually use those things for Krishna's pleasure, then the energy becomes transformed by His will into spiritual energy, and then you can remember Krishna.
The separated energy connects back to Krishna.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to stop now. It's getting close to 8:30. Thank you so much out there. All glories to Devahuti's question, which started this whole conversation and kept Kapila Dev going deeper into the truth. So Devahuti ki jai, Kapila Muni ki jai, Gaur Premanandi Hari Haribo, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai, Gaur Premanandi. See you tomorrow night, everyone. Hare Krishna. For some serious hearing and chanting.